welcome to the Red Chair again. We have Jenny Fielding with us, very special guest from New York. Great to have you here, Jenny.
Thanks for
in
having
Lisbon
me.
at Indico.
So excited to be here.
Tell me your story. You're a law school graduate, but turned entrepreneur, turned VC.
Recovering lawyer, as we say. Yeah, so born and raised in New York City, had a pretty traditional kind of start to my career, which was in law and then in finance. So worked at some, big companies. And then, like many founders, I saw a problem in the world that I was interested in solving. But I didn't think of it in terms of starting a startup. I thought of it as there's something that's not right, and I want to figure out if I can find a solution to it.
When was this?
So this is 2007.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to believe because New York is such a, big ecosystem, big tech ecosystem now.
No.
But back in the day, I didn't know any founders. There wasn't co-working spaces, there wasn't communities, there weren't accelerators.
There was really Silicon Valley, and on this side there was London, right? And
Correct.
That was it, right?
Yeah, and so New York, everyone was a banker, they were consultants, they were in real estate, but
All your friends.
They were in fashion, but they really were not in tech. And so when I had this idea, people kind of rolled their eyes, said, you've got this good career. What are you thinking? But like most founders, it just nagged at me. Why? Well, this is something so simple. Why couldn't it be solved? So I was lucky to team up with some folks that were technical, as I was not. And nights and weekends, we would just, kind of hack on a solution. And I was working full time, and so we bootstrapped to the point where we could actually launch. And then, funny story, because I ended up, my co-founders were like, okay, we need to raise some money. And I was like, oh, well, I work at a bank. Like, I can find us some money. So I didn't know about, like, angel investors. I didn't really know about, venture, anything like that. I just knew that, New York had a lot of wealthy people and that I was actually, trying to solve a problem that could be useful for others. So instead of, again, going into, the tech ecosystem, I just raised from, clients of the bank that I was working at.
That was okay, I suppose.
Yeah, a lot of them were said, Jenny, you're so entrepreneurial, you're young, what are you doing here? And so when it came time to start the company, it was like, okay, guys, like, let's write the checks.
And what problem were you solving then?
Yeah, so at the time, 2007, it was very expensive to make international calls on your mobile phone. Thousands of dollars. And I personally was racking it up because I had a relationship with someone that was living in Europe. And so, at the end of the month, I hated getting the bill because I was like scared to open it up.
You were getting it on the mailbox.
Yeah, and it was like charged by the minute, and it was just a really different time. And so I just thought, well, we have calling cards, we have all the technology, like, I think there's a better way that we can string this all together. And so that
because there was no Skype in the US, there was obviously no WhatsApp, and obviously
and no one was doing it on the mobile, right? So think of like what was happening in 2007. It was like the first iPhone came out, and all of a sudden, like, you had operating systems, and so you really could, develop technologies that sat on top of operating systems. So that was the first foray into entrepreneurship, and learned a lot of hard lessons running that company, everything from the people you team up to the capital that you end up taking, to your go-to-market, and, how you build your team. So I made a lot of mistakes, but it was good. It was good. It was a good way to start, get my foot in. And once I kind of, dipped into tech, I knew that I'd found the thing that I was excited about. Yeah.
What were the main things? You mentioned the team and, for example, the types of investors. Do you want to share a little bit of a couple of things that you think, you should have known better or did better
what's great is that when you have the entrepreneurial experience, I went on to start another mobile marketing company and also learned lessons there. But when you have the experience as a founder, when you then put on the hat as an investor, your perspective, is what you can share, and your history and the empathy that you have for founders is really prevalent. So, for me, I teamed up with some folks that were, very technically competent, but like we didn't have a lot of shared history or a lot of experience working with each other. We kind of like rushed into something, right? And so I see a lot of founders now because they want to check the co-founder box, right? They meet someone, they're like, great, let's go. And while that can be exciting and fun, you're going to spend
can be a disaster
10 years with these people. And so mine wasn't a disaster, but probably just wasn't the fit. So there were just a lot of lessons that I learned around making sure that these are people that you're going to spend more time with these people than your friends, your family, your loved ones. And so you've got to just find the right people. You've got to have great communication and kind of all those things. And I wasn't really thinking about it that way. I was thinking about it as like, okay, they were technical and they could help me get to where I wanted to go, which was very tactical, but it wasn't like long-term strategic.
But do you think that people nowadays, they do that same mistake because it's so fast-paced that they feel the need to get things done and just get hold of people, which are not, there's not that many people available anyway, right? So you just get hold of someone that can fill the gap in your team to...
100%.
But I mean, how can you solve this? I mean, could they do this differently, the founders today?
Well, I mean, if you're coming from another industry and you're just starting a company, it might be hard. But what's great about the world now, you can come to Lisbon, you can be part of entrepreneurial communities and you can get to know people and you can vet people through other people that you know. And so it's just really important to build networks, right? Because then I think you can have a better sense of, who these people are, what their experience is. Back in New York in 2007, I don't know, these people were there. There weren't a lot of people in tech. We didn't know people in common. Like the people I knew coming out of, law and banking were just not going to be able to give me references on, tech people. So I think now, there's accelerators, there's, so many events and communities that you can be part of. So hopefully that helps. But I still find founders, today, they realize that, the good thing is they realize that running a company by themselves is going to be hard. And so they have that first realization, which is great. Or they don't have a skill set that they need. And so they want to team up with someone. So I think the instinct is right. But the manifestation of moving so fast, I think can be hard. And as an investor at the pre-seed, I can't look at metrics. What I can only look at is people. Right?
That's what you're evaluating.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned also in that experience that you learned about, the type of investors you have. So you had some investors from your clients and stuff like that, but what did you learn in terms of picking the right investors?
Yeah, I mean, there's capital that is money, which is just a commodity, and then there's capital that's smart money, right? And that can lead to insights those people can help guide you in many ways. They can provide resources. So I think every entrepreneur needs to think about what capital can unlock. And in my case, I didn't come from the tech world and I was very green and it was the first time I was running a company. So having, the experience of someone like you or someone that has, been in the industry would have been very helpful for me. It wasn't available to me. I didn't even really know about it at the time. But I think, as founders now evaluate capital, I always say, just make sure these people are going to be with you for a long time, like your co-founders. Make sure that you guys have the same, vision of, the company will change, but what's your vision for running the company and just being aligned on that. And so the people that I took money from the first time, they were very outside of the industry. They didn't understand tech. And they weren't really interested in helping. They were interested in supporting me, which was great.
But they couldn't help you.
But they couldn't help you. And I think that can be fine as well, but you just have to know what you're getting into. And fast forward, all of a sudden I saw founders later on that were taking smart money, from people that could be helpful, insightful, unlock opportunities. And I was like, oh, that would have been great. Because I had to figure that out myself. And so, you learn a lot of hard lessons. But one of them is making sure the right people are on your cap table should you have that opportunity, right?
Of course. And so you ended up selling that first company?
I sold that first company
in the middle of the financial crisis, or how did that happen?
Yeah, well, like everything, a lot of serendipity. So I ended up sitting on an airplane next to a guy who was running the largest prepaid payment processor, in the world. And I tell everyone, we were sitting in the last row, so don't think you're going to meet everyone in business class. We were actually going to a tech conference called CES in Las Vegas, and we were both kind of bumped from our previous flights. We were sitting in the last row, and we just started talking, and everyone on that flight was going to CES. And by the end of the flight, he goes, I'm going to buy your company. And I was like, I've heard this before. And a few months later, we were in a process. So again, so much of, my career has been about, serendipity. And I think, just getting out there, being, meeting people and staying open to possibilities has been kind of the theme.
Right. But that also shows, that when you're in the US market, those kind of things happen, right? That's so much harder in Europe, that you're sitting next to someone on an airplane that will buy, just because the M&A market, particularly the tech M&A market, is just not here. I mean, not at that level, right? So
right.
That provides, that's
changing in a place like Lisbon. So many
changing.
people are coming through.
Getting much better.
Investors.
And then so you did that, and then what happened? Then
you
founded another company.
I started another company. And I had a really interesting opportunity to run a corporate venture and innovation group. So I sold my second company, funny story, and I was I was going to take a year off, and I was going to travel around the world. And my first stop from New York I ended up in London. And the first day I ended up meeting the team at the BBC, the British broadcast, who was building out an innovation and venture group. So it was like my first day, and I meet them kind of socially, and literally by the end of the night, they were like, okay, so you're coming and working with us. And so I ended up taking a job, and my friends were like,
but where did you going to travel?
My friends were like, you made it one day without a job, Danny? I was like, well.
This is what, 2012?
So this was 2010. Yeah. So it was actually a magical job. So I worked at the BBC and essentially, built a corporate innovation group from the ground up, and they really wanted an outsider who wasn't from the UK, who had been an entrepreneur. And so I checked a lot of those boxes, and I'd always, been a fan of the BBC and the mission.
Of course.
And so,
but it must have been a very different experience, right? It's not a startup culture.
Very different.
Type of company. It's very traditional,
very
I'd say.
Very traditional. But the people that were, the CEO, the head of digital, were very entrepreneurial, and they knew that if they were going to kind of reach their next goals as all around digital innovation, that they were going to have to kind of think differently. Right. And so we tried a lot of things, which was really fun. We incubated companies, we spun out companies, we acquired companies, but I think the best thing we did was we started the first corporate accelerator in Europe called BBC Labs. So I started that. Everyone thought it was like my little side project, and had a space, and this is this cute thing, and that turned out to be just this like incredible melting pot. We ended up incubating incredible companies, and it really was.
And you were also investing in those companies, I suppose.
And we would invest in some of those companies, and so we just tried lots of different things, but that was the thing that I think worked best. And I really was opened up to this idea of acceleration and what that meant. And through that, I ended up meeting the folks at Techstars, because
in London or in the US?
Really all over globally. Just because I was running this accelerator, and there weren't any. And so I kind of like reached out to everyone that knew more about this, and ended up meeting the folks at Techstars and just getting to know them. I became a mentor. They had a lot of folks ended up mentoring in my program, and that was how it started. So again, just being part of the ecosystem. Just
being there.
Yeah.
Just being there. And so you moved back to the US?
Yeah, so I was always kind of global. So for the job at the BBC, I was between New York, San Francisco, and London. And when I met David Cohen, the founder of Techstars, he had actually a few years before had tried to, had told me about opportunities at Techstars, and first time I turned them down. Second time I think I turned them down again, and then 2014 it was the right time. So I was like, all right, I'm coming to join this
incredible,
this great rocket ship. So.
And this was right at the beginning of when Techstars really expanded massive, right?
Yeah, so it was the time when they started partnering with corporates. Yeah. And so that was like a real inflection point.
And you had that experience in terms of building
and I had
the
that
corporate,
experience.
So what did you do? You went there and
did
lots of partnerships.
So the first program that I ran was around hard tech. And so that was actually funny because when they called me about the hard tech, I was like, but I'm like working in digital media. Like, I don't know much about hard tech. And, oh, Jenny, you'll be fine. And I kept on thinking, so Techstars is based in Boulder, Colorado. And I kept on thinking, I don't know what they're smoking in Boulder, Colorado, but I don't know anything about hard tech. And they said, no, you don't understand. Like, the companies know about the hard tech. Like, you know about helping build and accelerate companies. So that was right. But, I was a little bit insecure in my first program and made sure I had like all these technical people around and had like technical EIRs and all of this. And yeah, didn't end up not needing much of that because the problems are, the human
the hard
problems.
Tech, right?
Exactly.
It's all about people and
100%,
strategy.
100%. And so I was, really lucky. My first investment in that cohort, the first company that I actually invested in was a company called Latch in the connected security space. Incredible founders with this like crazy vision of reinventing like what a lock, what access could look like, but really from a software point of view. And many people were why would you invest in this company? There's so many lock companies out there. Like, what's the differentiation? But it was really about these founders. They had a vision, and they just saw the world like fast forward, 5-10 years out, and that was really what they pitched. Was like, here's the vision of the future. And so invested in that company as well as like a great batch of companies. Fast forward, that company went public last summer. So it was pretty incredible. So 7.5 years later, from, 2 guys and a prototype and a big vision to, a public company.
Amazing. And so you stayed on at Techstars for a few years?
Many years. So I was kind of the go-to startup new program person. So we got the hard tech program going. Then we launched a fintech program in New York in partnership with Barclays. I ran our partnership with a healthcare provider as well. And so it was really fun to kind of start and run these new initiatives. And through that, built a portfolio of about 75 companies.
Amazing. Yeah. And then you decided to leave and do your own fund.
I need a drink. Not exactly. So I was at Techstars for 7.5 years. And while I was at Techstars, so a few years ago now, so about 4 years ago, I was noticing something in the New York market. So when I started in 2007, totally nascent, no VCs. Fast forward to, 14, 15, 16, so many small micro funds starting to kind of fill in the gap. But what was happening was that there was so much cash coming into the ecosystem that these funds that were $20, $30 million had now raised $200 million funds. And so the economics, as you know, if you're running a $200 million fund, you can't write 100K checks anymore. No. And so founders were going through my accelerator programs, brilliant companies, and they were coming out and they really needed to raise between 500 and $1 million. It was quite difficult. I have this great story, a company that went through my program called Chainalysis, blockchain analytics company, recently raised at a $4.2 billion valuation. That company was very hard to get funded. Came out through the program, really just wanted to raise $1 million. Every VC took a meeting and said, I don't know if the market is that big for blockchain analytics, 2015. And so I said, okay, the VCs are not going to work. Like, let's start to call the microfunds and the angels. And there just wasn't enough there. It was very hard to get that round together. And interestingly, a VC in Berlin ended up, they were originally from Europe. They came through my program. Right. We thought, like, this is a company to get funded in the US. And a venture fund in Berlin ended up, leading the round. It was very disappointing to me because I was so excited for them to be there and, really thought that this was going to be a massive company and why weren't people in the ecosystem investing? But the insight was really, if you weren't raising, $3 or $4 or $5 million round, it was quite hard to get funded in New York.
Because the funds were just not there.
They just got bigger.
Small checks.
They got bigger. And so
you saw an opportunity.
So I saw an interesting opportunity. And convinced the folks at Techstars to, while I was at Techstars, allow me to, in a part-time capacity, get this kind of, call it an angel fund raised. And so in 2018, started my first fund, while I was also, full-time.
And how is that going?
Yeah, so, it's been an amazing ride. We started out with 50 LPs that were founders and operators just in New York and just investing in local New York companies. Right. And now we have a community of, 500 founders and operators who are all our LPs, and they're the source of our deal flow, our capital, and our community. And we've now invested in close to 200 companies. So That's amazing. Been a...
So what kind of tickets do you do?
So right now we're writing 50 to 250. So originally when I was kind of part-time, we were writing very small checks, and we're starting to ramp that up. And we're also quite active, on the follow-on, so.
And you do that globally, or no longer just New York, of course?
Yeah, so we were able to tap into, incredible founders and operators around the world. And so, now we invest in places like Nigeria and Sao Paulo and, all through this kind of distributed ecosystem of founders that are seeing deals early, looking at them, vetting them, and then sending them to us.
And hopefully Portugal soon.
I mean, yeah, Portugal is on the list. That's why I'm here.
Why are you here, by the way? What are you doing here?
There's such a rich fabric in Europe that I try to spend, at least 2 months a year here catching up with, founders, our community. Tomorrow we're hosting a dinner, just to make sure that we're involved in all the entrepreneurial activity. But across Europe, we've got, dozens of founders that are in our portfolio. And so the next iteration of our fund is really figuring out how to stitch these communities together. Until 3 months ago, I was part-time, at the fund, and so kind of did the best I could. But now that I'm full-time,
You have now left Techstars.
I've now left Techstars after 7.5 years just to focus on this. And when you have the time and the mental energy, you see all the things that are broken, and all the things you want to fix, and all the things you want to grow. And so this year is really about laying the foundation so that we can scale even more.
That's super exciting. Looking back all these years after law school, what are the main sort of things that you have learned? I know this is a big question, but what are the things that looking back you've said, oh, I wish I knew that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, what we started with, it all does come down to people. At the earliest stages of investing, we're indexing on people. And so just spending the time getting to know people, not chasing hot deals or hot verticals,
right,
but just going back to the core, which is like, does this person have a unique insight on the market? And when I follow that methodology of investing, now that I have data over 8 years,
it goes well.
It goes well. These are my best companies, right?
If it's the wrong people in the right market, it doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well. So look for people that have a unique insight. And sometimes it means they come from the industry, right? Sometimes it means that they experience something like myself, right? So I didn't come from, the telco industry in any way, but I saw a unique problem. And so I tend to index for those empath founders that are really solving a problem that they experience firsthand. And so I invest in a lot of first-time founders, but they have this vision of what the problem is and how they see the world, and that seems to be the secret sauce for me.
Wonderful. Jenny, great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Let's go and have lunch.
Yes.